Hello, and welcome to the Pittsburgh Personal Protective Measures Module Zero, where we're going to spend some time really understanding real world violence. I'm Senior Instructor Brent Earlywine. Let's get started. So let's take a quick look at why we're here. We really are going to break the discussion or the day into three chunks, if you will. So the first chunk is really what we're going to go through in this presentation, which is trying to provide a good real world understanding on what is violence, where it happens, why it happens, who perpetrates it, because quite frankly, most of what people need to understand to mitigate their risks is understanding what violence is and what it looks like. The middle section or the second section, of course, will be the hands-on training in the dojo, where we will physically train the concepts, work with one another, and really instill those skills that you can take away once things do go hands-on, God forbid. And then the third piece is we wrap up at the end of the seminar with a aftermath discussion, and this is really trying to understand the legal aspects of what happens if you ever have to use something in a self-defense fashion, whether that's empty-handed or with a weapon or with a firearm, what have you. There potentially are consequences there that we want to make sure that there's an understanding what is a legal definition of self-defense or is not, what those criteria look like. So really think of the three sections here. One, presentation on what is real world violence. Two, the hands-on section, and then of course the aftermath discussion. We're going to spend some time on violent crime statistics. We'll talk about the gift of fear, or the use of your intuition to predict what might be coming your way, or at least have some sort of heads up from a radar perspective, if you will. We'll do some discussion around predicting violent behavior and what that looks like. And then, of course, we'll also take a look at awareness levels and do a good definition of what's known as the OODA loop. And then establishing boundaries, thresholds, your go button, what have you. And then, of course, the now what, we will do a brief discussion around the aftermath. All right, let's go. So one of my favorite quotes is, why do people become violent? Because violence works. In the Western society, in the world that we live in, we find that violence is kind of an icky concept. People don't resort to violence to get what they want. We're civilized. We talk it out. We negotiate. But unfortunately, as human beings, we do utilize violence on a pretty regular basis, and it can and does show up in everybody's day-to-day lives. So, pretending it doesn't exist or pretending it's not an effective answer, even though we may not like it as an answer, really does yourself a disservice. So why are we here? Most self-defense programs start after the fact, if you will, and this is they're assuming that hands-on is the starting point. So this is why we labeled this presentation as Module Zero. So this is all the stuff that goes wrong or happens before it ever gets to a point of a hands-on scenario where you have to physically defend yourself. So 75% plus of what keeps you safe in that understanding happens before it ever gets to that point. And this is really where we're trying to give you the tools to recognize violence as it is starting to take place or before it ever starts to take place, so you can mitigate it, remove yourself from the situation, de-escalate, and really stay away from ever having to defend yourself or defend your loved ones. We firmly believe that knowledge is power, and power is there to keep you safe. So the more you know, the more you understand how, where, why real world violence takes place and the different types of violence, the more likely you are to not have to ever engage in it. And that ultimately is our goal, is to keep you safe. Self-defense, another great quote here from Mark McYoung: self-defense against violence is high-speed problem solving. The other thing that's a undercurrent here that we want to make sure is very valid is that you're never going to learn new skills in the moment. You need to prepare, understand, deepen your knowledge, and have those skills done and in your body, in your system, before you ever have to use them. Because you're going to be in the middle of some sort of altercation. It's going to move at a very high speed, and you're not necessarily going to have time to think through, learn new skills, and figure out what the answer is to the problem in the moment. So let's take a look at what is violence. All right, we'll spend some time on this slide. This is really understanding the different types of violence, and there's two main categories, if you will. One is social violence, and then asocial violence. We'll spend some time on the social violence first. This is most violence in the United States is going to be social in nature in some way, shape, or form. We'll talk through the different asocial types here in a second. But we'll start with what's known as the monkey dance. We'll go through some of those details in a slide that's coming up. But essentially, the monkey dance is really the typical. You're in a bar, two guys are staring one another down. They, what are you looking at? They escalate to bumping chests, poking each other in the chest, and then eventually somebody throws a punch, and then we're off to the races, right? The idea of a group monkey dance is where human beings are herd animals, and feelings of anger or feelings of panic are contagious, right? So group monkey dances can be very, very lethal very quickly, although it may not necessarily start that way because there's this feeding off of one another kind of scenario that happens in large groups of people. But it's still a social interaction and a social violence. Best way to think about that is if you look at YouTube videos on soccer matches in Europe, where you see, my team versus your team, and suddenly you got 1,000 people in the stands are just all beating the crap out of one another. So a group version of a monkey dance, but the same thing. It's really just kind of puffery, if you will, that can and does include up to, unfortunately, permanent injury and/or lethal outcomes. Although it may not necessarily start there or have an intent to get there, if you will. Educational beatdown. We talk about violating societal norms or group rules is really the best way to think about this. And once somebody has violated those rules or violated society's norms, then somebody is going to teach them a lesson and basically bring them back to the fold. An educational beatdown. Can and does include lethal options in certain societies. If you think of honor societies, Latin America would be a prime example where this may be a case or a driver where somebody is obligated by rules that if a particular rule is broken, then that person will pay for it with their lives. But it's still an educational beatdown. You've done something to violate the rules. We're going to teach you your lesson to make sure that you understand that those are rules that shouldn't be broken. Status seeking or a show. Best way to think about this is if you think about gang members or potential gang members that are then tasked with doing something to be accepted into the group, right? So you're going to gain status through committing a mugging, a robbery, or even a drive-by shooting, if you will. That this is going to prove their loyalty to the group or prove their status and show how loyal they are to whatever that group might be. Most violence in Western societies is social in nature. It's important to understand that typically social violence is going to come with a set of instructions. Shut your mouth or I'm going to kick your ass. Stop looking at my girlfriend, I'm going to pop you in the mouth. Those kinds of things. If it has instructions attached to it, then they're usually a good leading indicator that this is going to be social violence of some kind. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe. It doesn't mean that it can't end up with a permanent injury as a result or even a lethal outcome. But if it's got instructions, then it gives you an opportunity to potentially de-escalate or off-ramp or remove yourself from the situation. The instructions can be your friend, assuming that you don't let your ego get the best of you. And then again, we'll go through some more details on what the monkey dance looks like. Asocial violence, on the other hand, is a little bit different of an animal, pretty rare in Western societies. So these are the things that you see and hear about on the news all the time. You think about somebody that is a serial rapist, somebody that's a serial murderer. Very sensational. When and where it happens, it gets an awful lot of attention, an awful lot of media, as it deserves. But unfortunately, it's important to understand that it's not as common maybe as some people might think. Best way to look at this is in terms of predation, or somebody that's a hunter and you're the prey. And predation can be really two types of predators: a resource predator or a process predator. A resource predator is somebody that wants something that you have. Give me your wallet or I'm going to shoot you. Give me your car or I'm going to stab you in the face. Those are pretty simple and pretty straightforward and easy to understand. The process predator is a little bit different. This would be an example of somebody that's a serial killer, for example. They care much more about the process of the crime versus a resource, and you are nothing more than an object that they're going to use to enjoy the process. The other thing that shows up here, and we'll spend some more time on the different types of predation, but um, deep survival panic or extreme fear can also be asocial violence. Somebody that's a drowning victim, for example, it triggers their lizard brain. They're in complete panic mode, and you are no longer human to them because they aren't processing that information in that piece of their brain. They only care about surviving, and you're nothing more than an object that's in the way for them to get through. Somebody that's trying to escape a burning airplane, for example, you're between them and the exit to get off the plane. They don't care that you're Bob or Ted or Susan or whoever. They only care about their own survival, and they're in that survival mode and in that panic mode. That's another prime example of asocial violence. So let's talk through the monkey dance, and this is the single most common form of social violence that you're going to run into. And once you understand it, you're literally going to see it everywhere. I've got a couple of YouTube links there on the right that you're more than welcome to take a look at. Things like road rage incidents, people get into fights in bars, you name it. This is what you're going to see really all around you, and it's got a specific script, and it's going to escalate in a very specific fashion. And once you understand what that script looks like, you can hopefully protect yourself from participating in that script, and or you can see it start to take place before it ever gets to the physical hands-on piece. Usually going to start with some sort of eye contact, two guys staring at one another across the corner of a bar, and then it's going to go pretty quickly to the typical verbal challenge, right? What the heck are you looking at? Right? I'm not looking at anything, or I'm looking at your mother, right? So you get this verbal back and forth bantering and establishment of dominance and who's in charge, if you will. And then you're going to see the closing of the distance. This is where they get in each other's face, they're doing the chest bumps, they're poking each other with their fingers or shoving each other in the chest. And then what happens? We end up with some sort of dominant hand punch. And again, we're off to the races, and now suddenly we've got a bar fight. It's important to understand that this can and does result in people losing their lives all the time, usually through, falling, hitting their head, bouncing off a curb, or even just the attack itself. Even though that may not necessarily be the intent, it certainly is an outcome that's all too common. The other thing that's underneath here is the reason it's called the monkey dance is this is an emotional response in human physiology. Is once somebody has challenged you, you've got to protect your ego. You're going to respond. Oh yeah, well what about this? Oh yeah, your mother, right? So it's that kind of emotional script that starts to get triggered, and it's very difficult to get out of that emotional response once you're in it. Your emotional systems take over, and then you're again off and running on an escalation path. But once you understand what it looks like and how it escalates, what the steps are, then it's a lot easier, not perfect, but easier for you to off ramp and get out of that situation. Somebody tells you, hey, get out of my face or I'm going to knock your block off. You know what? You're right, sir. I apologize. I'm going to, go to the other corner of the bar, or, get out of here. I'm going to kick your ass. Yeah, you're right. No problem. I'm going to take off. Don't let your ego and your emotions get control, and run the script with the monkey dance. Very, very important. Understand it. Realize that, once you're in an emotional state of mind, you are now in the monkey state, and you're participating in a script and a dance that's a ritual that more than likely is going to end up with somebody getting seriously hurt. And honestly, it's usually about something that really doesn't matter, and it's not worth it. Conversely, if you look at asocial violence and some of the indicators, typically, one of the primary ones is you're going to see presence of weapons of some kind. There's an automatic escalation, right? This isn't, two guys in a bar bumping chests and somebody throws a punch. This is somebody that shows up, a little bit of premeditation. They've got a knife, they've got a firearm, they've got a blunt instrument of some kind. There's also typically some sort of disparity of force, younger person versus an older person, larger person versus a smaller person, male versus female. You'll see this disparity, and it's on purpose, right? The predator, in an asocial type of scenario, doesn't want to lose, so they're going to stack the odds ahead of time through force multipliers like weapons, angling, surprise attacks, what have you. The other thing that shows up a lot in asocial violence is isolation. They really don't want a witness to see the act. This is where you'll see secondary crime locations start to show up. Somebody tries to get you to go into their car to take you somewhere else. That isolation gives them the time and opportunity to focus on the process of the crime. And we'll talk through in the physical hands-on piece that you never want to get in the car. You never want to go to a secondary location. That is one of the thresholds and the boundaries that we want to trigger. The other thing here is normal off ramps don't work with the predator. What we mean by that is typical de-escalation skills, and interactions don't work that they the normally way that they would with a social violent kind of encounter. I am sorry, I apologize, you're right, I'm gonna turn and walk away. Typically they may use some of those tools to test your boundaries, do the interview, see if you're a viable victim, but at the end of the day they really don't care about the off ramps. They're going to follow their script regardless of what you do. The other thing here is speed of escalation. So both, kind of blasting through the de-escalation off ramps or interactions, and or how quickly it goes from initial interaction to the ultimate violence, as a typical indicator around asocial type of violence. And then, we talk about developing attack conditions. So this is angling, this is separation, this is isolation, and they're specifically, regardless of what their mouth might be doing, their body and their actions are actually developing and creating a situation that's advantageous to them to launch their attack. And there's no relationship here, but there's force teaming, and trying to create some sort of false relationship between you and them. There's some skills here that predators use on a pretty consistent basis. If they live in this world and play in this world, they're better at it than you are. But they're going to use your societal norms and your societal boundaries and thresholds and sense of courtesy, and you don't want to be rude. They're going to use those against you. So it's important to understand that once they start to do this kind of force teaming approach, that more than likely it's a indicator of asocial violence. So I'll start with the quote down at the bottom again, the Mark McYoung quote, and this is, you have two problems. Your self-defense doesn't work. Your self-defense does work, and we'll talk through what that looks like in terms of the aftermath. But here, really, if you look at the 5 stages of violent crime, there's a particular script, right? So intent. This is somebody that means to do you harm. If you recognize this in order of a timeline, the intent, nothing's happened, there's no interaction, somebody has intent to do you or do somebody harm, you still have the opportunity to prevent violence, right? The interaction hasn't begun, right? So you can leave the area, you can recognize the signs, acknowledge it, and then mitigate those risks. The interview, and we'll talk through what the interview looks like, but the interview is them basically trying to figure out whether you're a viable victim. Is it somebody that they can dominate, they can control, they can get what they want out of you? And they're trying to find out whether you're going to be an easy victim or a difficult victim. If you realize, again, here, nothing's happened yet, you're going through the interview. This is an interview you absolutely want to fail, in showing them that you're not going to be an easy target. You're not going to be an easy victim. They want an easy victim, get in, get out, get what they need, and move on. So you still have an opportunity to prevent violence at this stage of violent crime. Positioning, this is the angles, this is the separating somebody from the crowd, this is driving you towards a isolated area, this is getting close to you to actually get within range so they can reach you. Again, this is positioning, but the attack hasn't happened yet. You still can prevent the actual violence at this point. And then, of course, you have the attack and then the reaction to the attack. This is why we think this kind of understanding is so critical. Most self-defense classes, seminars, and materials starts at number 4, which is the actual attack itself. So much has happened before you get there that you can mitigate and prevent violence risks. It's unfortunate that people kind of skip those steps. So we want to help you understand, how many stages it has to go through and how much time you have to recognize and prevent and mitigate the potential for violence. And when we do the hands-on section, we'll talk through common attacks, common defenses, skills that you can walk away with today, tomorrow, to really keep you and your loved ones safe. And then the fifth one here is reaction. You can't discount what happens after self-defense has taken place, which is why we have the quote at the bottom. If your self-defense doesn't work, you have a problem, as in you end up getting hurt, or God forbid, you get to a point where there's permanent damage or even loss of life. Reaction could be it did work and you've caused damage to somebody else in protection of yourself. There's emotional and physical reactions to what that looks like. And there could be legal consequences as well, which I have listed as number 6, if you will, which is, all right, great. Your self-defense worked. You protected yourself in the moment. Now, potentially, you have to deal with the law, prosecuting attorneys, whether you were in the right or in the wrong. There could be life-changing consequences after the fact as well. So in Western society, we have, thank goodness, societal norms where we want to be courteous. We don't want to be rude to other people. We certainly don't want to cause damage or injury to somebody else. The challenge is that, those boundaries, thresholds, and societal norms can and will be used against you from a predator that understands that's how you're wired. So don't assume that because you find violence repugnant, that so does everybody else. There's entire swaths of society that utilize violence as a tool every single day. Since they're using it every single day, that's part of how their life is defined. That's part of how their models and frameworks are designed. They certainly don't find it repugnant. They find it's just another tool in the toolbox, and it's a very effective tool. It's hard to acknowledge that, but it's absolutely true. So let's shift gears and talk about, where does violence usually occur? These 5 notes really are going to be another critical piece of understanding for you to understand, to mitigate and remove yourself from potential violent situations, and usually in social violence settings, and asocial as well. But violence happens where people go to get their minds altered. Best example of that is, violence shows up in places where people are consuming alcohol. So, nothing good ever happens at a bar at 2 o'clock in the morning, for example. Violence happens where young men gather in groups. We talk about the group monkey dance, one group versus another group. And, directly attached to that is where violence happens is in territories where territories are in dispute, whether that's real or imagined. So if we take those two and put them together, prime example, we have the photo down on the bottom left-hand corner, the soccer matches in Europe that we used as an example in an earlier slide, where you've got people that are defending their territory, my team versus your team. It's kind of an imagined territory, if you will. So there's not a physical line in the sand between the two groups, but it's, I belong to my group, you belong to your group, you suck, I'm great, and suddenly we're off to the races. Wherever young men might gather in groups, whether that's a group of young men at a club or a bar, young men at a sporting event of some kind. It's sad to say, but very true, that typically young men in that 16 to 25 range from an age perspective, typically are going to be the most prone to some level of social violence. And they're doing that on purpose. They're trying to find their way in society. They're trying to figure out, kind of who's in charge and what's the hierarchy of, my guy versus your guy, if you will. And then predatory violence, this is the asocial example, happens in lonely places. This is the secondary crime location. This is the transition areas between someplace that's where groups are, like you just exited the bar, but you're walking through the alleyway to get to where your car is parked. This is the parking garage. This is the piece of the street that's not very well lit or where crowds aren't. It's very quiet and lonely, and there's not a lot of people around. And then the other thing here is violence happens in time. And we talked through that on the stages of violent crime, where you have an opportunity to de-escalate, find an off-ramp, remove yourself from the situation, and mitigate those risks. And time is a gift. The threat of violence is a gift. It's another way to think of if violence is happening in time or on a timeline, somebody threatening violence is giving you a gift to recognize that it potentially could take place, and what are your opportunities to de-escalate, off-ramp, and get out of the situation. So there are a couple of fundamental truths when it comes to violent assault. Assaults happen fast, hard, close, and with surprise. Some of that absolutely by design. If you take a look at some of the violent predators from an asocial violence, they don't want you to fight back. They don't want to risk injury. So they're going to position themselves within attack range. They're going to angle to come at you from your blind side. They're going to separate you from friends and larger groups, so there aren't friends and people to help you respond and defend yourself. It's going to be a little bit of a blitzkrieg attack because they want to have this flurry of assault that is going to overwhelm your systems to make sure that you don't have an ability to respond. So it's closer than you think. It's faster than you think. It's unexpected, and it happens a hell of a lot more suddenly than you think it will. And there's more power than you might necessarily anticipate. And this is part of why when in the hands-on section, we actually hit pads, hit one another, so you get past that kind of boundary or gate of, once you get hit, you're going to just crumple and fold and drop to the ground, and, you're not going to fight back. If you get hit a couple of times, you'll recognize that, okay, mentally and kind of even on a soulful or spiritual level, I'm still okay. I'm still in the fight. I'm still alive. I can still deal with it, and I can still keep on going. We want to make sure that you don't just survive, but you thrive. You got to keep on going. And one of the few ways to get through that gate is you got to get popped and bumped a couple of times to really understand that, okay, I didn't like it. It sucked, but I'm still alive. I'm still in it. So if I'm going to run my own script when it comes to potential for experiencing violence, what I'm going to do about it, I'm going to use this as my rule. It's better to avoid than run. So if I understand how and where real world violence takes place, different types of violence, who perpetrates it and why, it's much better to avoid it entirely. It's better to run than de-escalate. I don't need to have a interaction with somebody. I don't owe them anything. I can just turn and run, right? We make a joke about run jitsu is probably one of your most effective answers, and it's absolutely got some truth to it. But if I can't run, it's better to de-escalate than fight. I want to find those off ramps. I want to, put my ego in check and stick it in a box and, apologize, back up, move away, tell them that they're absolutely right, not participate in that monkey dance. Then it's better to fight than it is to die. If push comes to a shove, literally, and I don't have a choice, then I really have to understand what my thresholds and boundaries are, that once I get crotched, I push the go button and it's time. I have to go. I have to defend myself. I have to take care of my loved ones. So it's in that order. It's better to avoid than run, better to run than de-escalate, better to de-escalate than fight, and better to fight than die. So there's a old saying that is very appropriate when it comes to the news. If it bleeds, it leads. You would, think that the world is falling apart around our ears just based on what you hear every day on the local news and national news when it comes to violent crime. So the good news is that that is not borne out by the actual data, so it ends up being a false positive, if you will. So the good news is in the United States, we're in a multi-decade decline in violent crime rates. And this is violent crime, property crime, and this trend continues. So we're 25 years plus. Most recent data is 2017. It's usually updated about every year, year and a half, based on self-reporting from state and local sources as well as national sources. So regardless of what the news may be may be telling you, it's important to understand that the violent crime rate is absolutely on a decline. So when we make comments that more than likely you're not going to be the victim of violent crime, this is part of what's underneath that statement. It's also important to call out here that this is really your tax dollars at work. So if you have some time, I encourage you to go onto the FBI crime statistic site. It's free. It's publicly available. You can download in Excel and database format, so you can slice and dice the data and look at it. It'll show you, by crime, by location, by perpetrator, by weapon used, by you name it, right? So very interesting way to go burn a couple hours to take a look at the reporting. Encourage you to do that at least once or twice, so it just helps you put some perspective around what really is taking place in the United States. Doesn't necessarily hold true around the world, but this is our answer in our backyard. So now we're going to shift gears and we're going to talk through awareness levels and the OODA loop. Don't worry if you haven't heard that term before. We're going to explain what it looks like. So let's spend some time here. There's a gentleman by the name of Cooper that developed a color code system, and it's a great way to really just understand awareness levels. So if we take a look at where most people spend their day, you're going to be in what we would call white, and the colors are really there as just an easy reference point to explain the different awareness levels that most human beings are going to operate in on a typical basis, as well as reaction to specific stimuli, whatever it might be. So white is, zero situational awareness. This is somebody, face buried in their phone. They're not paying attention to what's going on around them. They got their head down. There's just really, even though the human system is accepting input from all around them, they're really just not paying attention to anything. And this is where, most people operate on a pretty consistent basis. The next level up would be what would be called condition yellow. So this is a relaxed alert. Something's triggered your interest. You're not even sure what it is. You may not have even identified it, but something has given you pause, and you've lifted your head from your phone and you're kind of looking around to go, okay, what the heck's going on? Is there something here I need to pay attention to and deal with? And then we move to what we would know as condition orange. So this would be a very specific alert. This is, somebody has started to approach you. Somebody has started to interact with you. There's some sort of specific stimulus that your brain and your senses has brought to your attention that you are now focused on and paying attention to. That doesn't mean that you've solved anything yet, but you are now focused on whatever that stimulus might be. And then condition red is really the hands-on piece. Right now, somebody's moved to, attacking you, putting their hands on you, and this is a condition that you have to deal with and figure out how you're going to resolve. So that would be condition red. And then, a little bit of fun today, but what's the point of being afraid of the zombie apocalypse if you're already a zombie? So this is where you see people walking around in condition white. They're just not paying attention to any of their situation or the environment around them. A couple of silly YouTube videos out there where people walk into telephone poles or light poles because they just don't lift their head and take a look. So you don't want to be a zombie. You want to have some sort of awareness, some sort of paying attention. If we go back, I'll take a look. But essentially, you can't be in a heightened state of awareness all the time. You want to bounce between kind of white and yellow, white and yellow. If you try to end up at a high level of awareness on a constant basis, it's exhausting. There's no reason for it. So you should be generally aware of your situation. You should put your head on a swivel, take a look around, and might just save your life someday. So let's spend some time on what's known as the OODA loop, and that stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. And Ultimately, what this is really how the human brain and the human system um, observes stimuli that's coming in and then decides what to do about it. So the best way to think about this is the observation piece of this loop is you see or observe something that catches your attention, and then you're going to orient onto whatever that stimulus is. And then once you've oriented on the stimulus, you're going to make a decision on what should I do about it or not do about it, as the case may be. And then once that decision is made, then you're going to act. And that act could be doing something or not doing something, but it's still a decision and then some level of action, if you will. This entire loop is usually what's known as human reaction time to a single stimulus. This is anywhere from about 200 milliseconds to about 250 milliseconds. That's been consistently tested. There's usually no way to short circuit this loop. That's just the amount of time it takes for you and your system to get through a stimulus. All decisions are based on observations of an evolving situation tempered with implicit filtering of the problem being addressed. So what does that really mean? Essentially, you're going to observe and filter that information. You're going to orient on it, and then you're going to make a decision on what the heck to do about it, and then you're going to do whatever that act is that you've decided to do. Good news and bad news buried inside of the OODA loop. The good news is it is a process. The bad news is that it is a process. You will have to go through that entire loop before you can react to the next stimulus. And this really starts to play into, how do we react to an incoming attack or incoming stimulus of some kind? What do we do about it? How fast can we react? There's not really a way to short circuit this process and get through it faster, but we will do some operant conditioning to actually leverage the OODA loop to your advantage. There's a great book out there by Gavin DeBecker called The Gift of Fear. If you don't own it or haven't read it, I highly encourage you to stop what you're doing and go out and buy a copy. It's available on Amazon, bookstores, what have you. Highly, highly recommended. And essentially, Gavin is talking through our system of intuition and what it's telling you. So let's spend some time going through it. It's important to understand what Gavin says, and we agree with, is your intuition is typically always right. Your intuition is usually in response to something. If you think of all the human systems and senses, you're collecting a vast amount of information literally every second of every day. So it would drive us crazy if we paid attention to every piece of information that our systems and senses are bringing in. But usually what we do is we do what's known as pruning. So our brain essentially prunes what they consider or what it considers non-essential information, but it's still absorbing it, it's still bringing it in. And it's important to understand that since sooner or later, your intuition or those reactions is your brain filtering through all that information and then eventually bumping something up to the surface to trigger a reaction of some kind to say, hey, you really should be paying attention to this. So that's why it says that it has your best interests at heart. It's your systems going, hey, look, I'm trying to protect you. I'm trying to keep you safe. Maybe you should pay attention to this. Typically where this goes off the rails is our interpretation of what intuition is telling us is not always right. We may dismiss it, we may poo-poo it, we may say to ourselves in our own little inner voice, oh, that's crazy, that's not what's really happening. So it's usually our interpretation of what's happening and the intuition is what's not right. And then our intuition knows more or remembers more about the situation than we're consciously aware of. This is the pruning aspect that I was referring to, where the human brain filters out non-important information, but it's still there in your system somewhere. And then sometimes when you think you're making something up, you're essentially calling something up. And the easiest way to understand that is where you dismiss something, where you've got that voice in your head that says, oh, that guy makes me feel weird, or I've got a bad gut reaction to it, and then you dismiss it and you go, oh, you know what, I'm just making that up. That's crazy. I shouldn't listen to that. The other important thing to think here and remember is intuition gives you time. We've talked through this presentation that time is also a gift. So if your intuition is a gift, it's giving you time to do something about what you now should be paying attention to. So as we go through the color codes and the awareness levels, your intuition brings something up. You want to pause, take a look at it. It doesn't necessarily need to be bad, but it should be something that you should pay attention to, because it's giving you the gift of time to then deal with or make decisions on whatever you're now paying attention to. So let's talk through some of what's known as the messengers of intuition. You get a nagging feeling about something, and we'll use a simple one. It's not necessarily a violent example, but you're driving away from your house, you're on the way to work, and you've just got this nagging feeling that maybe you forgot to turn the coffee pot off, right? So, or you forgot to lock the front door, or what have you. Persistent thoughts, thoughts that really just won't go away. This is your intuition. You've tried to dismiss it, you tried to just let it go back into the background in your head, but it just keeps coming up over and over and over and over again. It's a messenger you want to pay attention to. Humor or dark humor is an interesting one, and one that is probably a messenger you should pay one of the most attention to. Dark humor might be, oh, if I go with this guy back to his house, it's not like the guy's a serial killer, right? So it's this dark humor type of messenger from your intuition. Wonder, curiosity, those are really good examples. Again, intuition may pop something up that doesn't necessarily have to be bad, but you should always have a sense of curiosity and wonder. I use the curiosity one for me in particular shows up a bunch where, oh, that's interesting. I notice something or something pops up in my head. So, oh, wow, that's kind of curious. What is that? I wonder about it. I want to look at that a little bit more to understand really what it is. Anxiety, or that feeling of anxiety, is another important one. When you get hunches or gut feelings, this even shows up in our language that we use all the time. Is I got a gut feeling about that, or that just makes my stomach churn, or something along those lines, where it's your intuition trying to tell you something. If you have a hesitation or you have some level of doubt, you're not really sure, there's something that's holding you back, there's a intuition there that you really should examine and try to see what's underneath it. And then, of course, if you have suspicion or there's a level of apprehension, this is something that probably is a little more important of a message that you should stop, pause, take a look at, think through. And then, of course, fear. And this is, why Gavin's book is called The Gift of Fear. Is fear is absolutely a gift. If something triggers a feeling of fear, even if you don't know what it is or don't completely understand it, that's your body and your systems and your senses telling you there's something going on that could cause you significant harm. Stop, pay attention, and figure out what you're going to do about it. So if our intuition and paying attention to our intuition is listening, then prediction is really trying to solve the puzzle. So we're going to talk through predicting violent behavior. So we talk about, before something ever goes hands-on, there's going to be indicators that will give you time to de-escalate or off-ramp or remove yourself from the situation. So let's talk through pre-incident indicators. We talk about the interview. This is the interview that you want to fail. This is where they're testing you to see if you're a viable victim. You're going to cause them trouble, whether they feel that they're going to be successful in whatever they're trying to attempt. Usually the interview is showing up in resource predation or potentially process predation. The forced teaming we talked about is really this, using verbiage like we when there's no economy of a relationship between you and the other person. Context is the behavior appropriate for the context within what the interaction looks like. Loan sharking is another really good one. This is an unsolicited offer. Great example of that is, somebody that wants to offer you a free drink. You haven't asked for it. You don't know who they are. They're trying to maybe establish, hey, I just bought you a free drink, therefore you owe me something, and it's unsolicited, nor have you necessarily agreed to it. Too many details. Typically, if somebody's in a nervous state of mind, they may give you more details than you ask for, or more details skills than would be normally required to explain something. So it's a little bit of a red flag. Um, Over and excessive charm, compliments, unsolicited promises. These are examples where somebody's trying to establish that interaction and or potentially preparing for an incident and a violent encounter. Um, Discounting the word no is a big one. No is a complete sentence, and really this is a boundary setting on your behalf. You don't have to explain it. It's okay to be rude, and typically somebody that means to do you harm will test to see if you really mean the word no. If you establish a boundary and then you allow them to violate it, all you did was convince them that your boundaries don't hold water and you're going to essentially be a pushover. So you need to maintain and establish your boundaries and then hold them when pressed. Rule of opposites. This is typically, an idea of, what's the normal social interaction. They're, are they, you're standing at a party, you're having a conversation with somebody. What's that personal space look like? Of course, this can change between cultures, between states, and even between countries on what's the acceptable appropriate distance for personal space, for example. But somebody that's standing too close or somebody that's angling a certain way is a good way to just really understand, is this appropriate? Is this match kind of the normal, acceptable societal behaviors and boundaries? So we talked about the interview. Let's spend a few minutes there, right? So you're being tested and evaluated. Are you a good victim? They're evaluating what your boundaries look like. Are you going to engage in conversation? Can you be manipulated by guilt? A good example of that is the panhandler, right? So, hey, buddy, can you spare a dollar? The answer is no, or no, thank you, and you keep on moving. And then they're really going to try to play on societal norms, like, hey, what's the matter with you? You look like a rich guy. You can afford a dollar. You can't help a brother out, right? They're going to test you and use guilt against you to try to get what they want. And then are you going to yield to somebody's will? This is you establish that boundary, and then if somebody goes to violate that boundary, are you going to maintain it or are you going to crumble like a house of cards, right? So are you going to have your resolve weaken when somebody actually violates those boundaries and tries to control your conduct? And then when you maintain those boundaries, when you're pressed, it's one, to establish the boundary, but two, to maintain and hold that boundary. So there's two tests in the interview. One, where your boundaries at, and then two, are those really the boundaries that you're going to maintain and hold, or are they false fronts that they can just blast through? Victim selection. This could be a particular type. Again, this goes into evaluating what a victim is from their perspective and what they can get away with. And then the context is really the setting, the circumstances. Is this appropriate for where and in what you're doing at that particular moment in time? So we said this, it's worth repeating. No is a complete sentence. It's okay to be rude. I know that's difficult to get through sometimes. No offense, but sometimes it's more difficult for women than it is for men to break societal norms and behave in a manner which you might find rude. It's okay. And, it is a skill that you need to learn. So, if you get the phone calls at home and it's a telemarketer, you don't have to engage in conversation. You don't have to explain yourself. No, thank you. Hang up the phone and move on to the next one. The panhandler on the corner is asking you for money. No, thank you. Keep on walking. You don't need to stop and engage in conversation. If somebody starts to violate one of your boundaries, this may be a test or part of an interview. No is a complete sentence. You do not owe anybody an explanation. So it's important to internalize that. So if you look at pre-attack indicators, this is the last step before it goes hands-on. Developing proper range. So you think of closing, somebody that's getting close enough to you that they can get hands on you, or the weapon of choice might be effective within a specific range. Cornering or separating you from the rest of the group. Attack positioning. You'll see this in the social monkey dance, if you will, where there's a blading aspect of the body right before the punch gets thrown. So this is positioning to get ready for launching the attack, whatever it might be. Where the hands are located, you'll hear in law enforcement circles, military circles, to pay attention to the hands. Why? Because hands can kill you. So locations of the hands, if they're around the waistline, typically will be an indicator of, reaching for a hidden weapon of some kind, or in the pockets, a knife, a gun, what have you. So where the hands are located, if they're around the waistline, that's a pretty good indicator that something's about to go wrong. I mentioned the blading or coiling. This is something you'll see if you go look at YouTube videos, where somebody that starts to turn away or take a half turn away, they're not actually turning to leave, they're coiling for the attack and for the punch, the slash, the cut, what have you. A witness check is another one. They start looking around to see if anybody's paying attention. Are you in a lonely place? Are there a bunch of people around? Is it well lit? They're going to do that witness check. The lowering of the jaw on the behalf of the attacker is interesting. There's a physiological thing here where they're protecting their own vulnerable spots before they go into attack mode, and that is by lowering the jaw, they're protecting and covering their throat and their arteries. Self-soothing or or petting or calming themselves. You'll see this a lot as well if you realize that there's stress in their systems, so they're soothing themselves or calming themselves in preparation for the attack. You'll see um, petting or patting or stroking, playing with hair, fidgeting with their clothes, and then a weapons check. They may not necessarily pull it and show it to you, but they're going to pat a pocket or pat a position where a weapon might be hidden. They may also, as they blade away or half turn away, they may draw that weapon out of sight to get it ready to deploy it, get ready for the attack, but they haven't actually shown it to you yet. So these are all things to understand that an attack is about to happen. It's also a way to articulate self-defense in front of a court of law as well, and a prosecuting attorney, that this is how you can explain why you potentially may be preemptively striked, or why you had to respond. You've gone through and you've outlined all the actions the other person took to get ready to attack. So we may not like it, but if you can't escape an altercation through awareness of what's going on, avoidance, off ramps, and de escalation, and it becomes a point of time where you have to go hands on, then ending violence quickly is your goal. You don't want to tap dance. You don't want to play around. You don't want to trade blows. You want to be fast, violent, and quick to end and stop them doing whatever they're doing. That doesn't mean that you keep going once the threat is stopped. It just means that once it gets to that point, you have to be fully committed and fully in the moment, and ending violence quickly is your ultimate goal. Another great quote: violence of action trumps technique. And really what Jeff is saying here is that it doesn't need to be pretty. It doesn't need to be the awesome thing you saw in a martial art dojo. If it works, it works. The violence of your action is going to trump any attempt at quote unquote a technique. What you care about is what's going to get the job done, what's going to keep you safe, what's going to allow you to move to safety, what's going to keep you alive. That's the most important piece. And when we do the hands-on piece in the seminar over the next day or 2 days, we are going to focus on what's the down dirty technique, opportunity, and action that's going to keep you safe versus something that's going to require 30 years of training, right? So that's not what we're all about. We're all about keeping you safe and getting you home. So we'll talk through boundaries and thresholds. We've already alluded to them in terms of the interview and maintaining and holding your boundaries, but let's keep on going. So I ask the question all the time in the seminars is, what's your go button? You want to establish, your triggers and your thresholds ahead of time. So you want to pre-decide what is going to be important enough to you that you're going to make a decision to go, assuming that it's going to end up in a hands-on situation of some kind. I want you to predefine, right? So I can tell you what's important to me, my wife, my kids. Property is not important to me. So if somebody wants my car, they can have it. If they want to have my keys, they want to have my wallet, they want to have my watch, they want the cash out of my pocket, I really don't care. There's nothing there that is worth losing my life over. Conversely, if somebody wants my car, but my kids are still in the back seat and can't get out, they can't have my car because I care about my kids, right? So I'm going to have that as one of my pre-decided thresholds that if it came to that, I have to do something. And is your go button, is it an intellectual? Is it emotional? Are you participating in some sort of emotional response? Lots of people have lost their lives because somebody was going to mug them and take their property, and they decided to die over something stupid like they weren't going to lose their watch. And is that something that's really worth the risk and potential of losing your life, as well as your family and loved ones losing you in their lives? And then you're going to decide ahead of time what's your act in response. Am I just going to turn around and run? Am I going to fight? Am I going to do something else? So you want to predetermine and pre-decide what your actions are. As we said, you won't learn new skills in the moment. We also said that self-defense is high-speed problem solving. By pre-deciding and pre-thinking through these scenarios and what your decisions might be, you're giving yourself tools that you can rely on in the moment to make better decisions, to make faster decisions, without having to ponder and freeze in the moment and try to figure out what the heck are you going to do. Very important. So we've had a opportunity to train with some really great thought leaders in the world of violence and self-defense. Rory Miller uses one here called the Golden Rule of Combat. This is your most powerful weapon applied to your opponent's greatest vulnerability at his time of maximum imbalance. The other one is from Mark McYoung. He uses what's called the Iron Rule of Three. It's similar thought, just a different way to look at it. So you want to, any move that you make, any action that you take needs to accomplish three things at the same time. You want to secure your perimeter, you want to disrupt their ability to attack, and you want to set up your next move. And we'll do some drills that will walk you through what this looks like. I have a tendency to default to and like the Iron Rule of Three. It's a great framework to understand your shape, your movement, your actions on how I accomplish multiple things at one time. And if you remember the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, and act. If I can combine multiple things at the same time through that process, then I have short-circuited it in some way, shape, or form. So critically important to understand that, and we'll train that way. So I want to talk to you on a person-to-person level, and this is something that I want you to internalize. You need to give yourself permission. Again, we reference the Western societal norms, and for the most part, it lubricates society, it keeps everything moving in a fashion. We don't default to violence. That's not how we get things done in a civilized society. But it's important to understand that when and if violence is happening or coming to you, you have permission to defend yourself. You have permission to be rude to somebody. You don't owe somebody courtesy if you're in the middle of a pre-incident or pre-attack kind of scenario. You have permission to say no, and you don't have to explain it any further than that. You don't have to tell them why you said no. You have permission to just say no. No is a complete sentence. You have permission to survive no matter what it takes. This could be a zero-sum game, so this means you have permission to fight dirty if it means your life, whatever it takes to get home to my loved ones, to my kids, to my wife, to your husband, what have you. You have permission to protect yourself and survive. You have permission to act. You don't have to wait and look for approval from somebody to do something to protect yourself. You also have permission to win, and what's interesting here is you get to determine and define what winning looks like. I can't define it for you. You get to define it for yourself. So you have permission to win, and you have permission to define and determine what winning looks like for you. So the last two slides here really are kind of around the aftermath discussion, but important for us as a baseline. This is a great way to explain what self-defense is or what self-defense is not. And if you think of self-defense, what's legally allowable or defensible as inside the box, What is not self-defense is a couple of things. Not knowing when to stop, right? So the threat has ceased being a threat and you continue, that is not self-defense. Not leaving. So if you have an opportunity to exit the area before something happens, then that is not self-defense. That is now participation. So that goes right to the third one, which is if you helped create the situation, you helped escalate the situation, you were actively participating in the situation, that is not self-defense in the eyes of the law. The other piece here is an excessive or a response that's overkill. If somebody shoves you in the chest and you just haul off and beat them with a brick, that is an excessive response, and more than likely is not going to be the legal definition of self-defense. So these are things to understand ahead of time. When emotions are high and the adrenal dump happens, it's easy for somebody to cross the line between victim and perpetrator. And we say the statement all the time, that line is extremely thin and very easy to cross. You need to understand that when we talk about assess, plan, act during the hands-on seminar, this is part of what we're referring to. We are always assessing the situation. Do I need to continue? Are they still presenting a threat? Do I need to protect myself? Can I de-escalate? Can I off-ramp? Can I leave the situation? Can I move to safety? These are all part and parcel for understanding what is and is not self-defense. And then the last piece here is really the interactions with the police. We said that you have two problems. Self-defense works, self-defense doesn't work. But at the end of the day, the interactions with the police, they're going to show up. There's been a upheaval in society. They're meant to keep the peace. They're there to secure the area, stop whatever the situation is. Somebody's probably going to go to jail, and it's important to understand that it just might be you. When the cops roll up on the situation, they have no idea who the good guy is or the bad guy is. They're potentially going to arrest everybody that's part of the altercation, and they're going to let the courts figure it out. This is not the time to argue with a police officer. This is not a time that police officer is going to determine, who's guilty, who's innocent. Hey, officer, I was doing this in self-defense. Okay, yeah, great. Get in your car. You can go home. That's not how this works. They're not there to make that determination. They're there to keep the peace and calm the situation. And they'll let somebody else figure out whether a crime has been committed and who was guilty of that crime. Important to understand that somebody that deals in violence on a regular basis, they're going to play the victim too, right? So they're going to tell the police officer, "Hey man, it wasn't me. Hey man, that guy started it. Hey, that guy, they pulled a knife on me. They punched me for no reason." Everybody's going to play the victim, and it's important to understand that the police officer again has no idea if that's really true or not. And then also important to understand that cameras are everywhere today. Security cameras, cell phones. Good news, bad news is that cuts both ways. Good news is if you are in the right, there probably is a recording somewhere of what took place. If you, however, played outside the box of legal self-defense, you had an excessive response, you escalated, you participated, then there's probably also a video recording of that taking place as well. And usually that's going to be held against you and or show up in a court of law at some point. All right. Well, thank you very much for the time. Hope you've found this viable and valuable for your investment of time. We're going to move to the hands-on portion of the seminar, and then after that, we'll have a discussion from a aftermath perspective. All right, let's go.